Mike, check 1 2 1 2. It's the Y2K collector, and you have probably been lied to when it comes to the affordability of retro game collecting in 2024. And this is something that I really wanted to talk about because I've been going over my November pickups, and I had a lot of pickups in November, and many of these you've already seen, right? But I wanted to just talk for a quick minute because all throughout this year, and obviously in years past, a lot of people have talked about how retro game collecting is unaffordable. A lot of people feel like they've been priced out. A lot of people feel like they cannot buy video games because they're just too expensive. And a lot of people are having just kind of negative feelings towards collecting physical media. There is that side of the camp that is ecstatic about retro game collecting. They love it. They buy games and they move on with life. But I think part of the reason that people feel like retro game collecting is just completely um, destroyed, like completely far gone, that it's so unavoidable, is I think a lot of that has to do with YouTube and what YouTube shows you about retro video games. And that includes my channel. Now, my favorite genres of video games happen to be beat 'em ups, shoot 'em ups, hack and slash games, run and gun shooters, platformers, things of that nature. It just so happens that a lot of those types of games, especially when you start to look at older consoles like the Genesis and Super Nintendo, it just so happens that a lot of the games that fall into that genre happen to be pretty pricey. Now, there are a lot of games that are not pricey. I'll give you an example. Classic beat 'em up is the original Final Fight. And that's a game that's only about 15 to maybe $20. But then Final Fight 3, which is probably the superior version of the 3 in that you have more moves, you've got special attacks, the sprites look better, the levels look better. It's just an overall better game playing experience. Final Fight 3 is going to cost 10 times the price of the first Final Fight. That and the first final and that and also rather that the Final Fight 3 is a bit more rare. So a lot of times when you see someone talking about a game on YouTube, a video game, a lot of times they'll be talking about the Final Fight 3s of the retro gaming world. And I think that while, yes, some people might say that they're showing you the more expensive item because it's the shinier thing to show, a lot of times those expensive games are the superior games to play. They're just the better version. They're the better games to play. I don't think that every game that's really expensive is expensive for no reason. I think that a lot of the video games that you see that are expensive because they're exceptionally good. They've got great music, they've got great graphics, they've got great pacing, they've got the almost a perfect level of difficulty where it's difficult but not too difficult. There's some type of memorable features to the game that kind of gives you some type of nostalgic connection. All of these factors make expensive games expensive. Now, again, this does not apply to all expensive games, but it does apply to some expensive games. And I'll kind of give you an example of what I mean just by looking at my pickups in for November. Now, I'm going to move the Capcom Fighting Collection off to the side, but we can still look at this, right? Because there are cheaper PlayStation 4 and cheaper Switch games that I could have picked up over this past weekend. They had Karate Kid, the new Karate Kid beat 'em up game that was only $20. They had Broforce that was only $15. There were a lot of games that were probably cheaper to get other than getting the Capcom Fighting Collection. But the reason that I picked up the Capcom Fighting Collection is because one, it has a ton of nostalgia packed into one cartridge / disc. Two, they are the most superior 2D fighting games of all time. Three, they include one of the best beat 'em ups of all time in The Punisher. And four, what you get inside the box, that comic book is just top tier. I mean, it makes it for me. So this is going to be an expensive game, and odds are the price of this game won't go down unless like the big box retailers put it on sale eventually after it's been out for some time. You might get $10 or $15 off. But games like this are games that are going to typically be expensive because they serve a niche market. All right, let's look at some other retro games though, right? So you've got two retro games here. One is The Legend of Starfy and one is Transformers. Both of these I picked up, both added to the collection. And these are some of the cheaper retro games that I've picked up. And a lot of times when video game collectors talk about their pickups, they're not going to show you Transformers on the DS and Starfy because these aren't some of the most expensive games, especially on the DS. However, The Legend of Starfy is an extremely good-looking 2D sprite-based game on the DS. It's actually a great game. I think if you're into like that 2D pixel art, like platforming style of game, you'll love The Legend of Starfy. And Starfy, The Legend of Starfy is actually a pretty cheap game. Now, if you're a person who's wanting to get into retro, this is a great place to start. However, this is not going to be the type of game that you'd probably see featured on someone's YouTube channel. Another game that I recently picked up and added to the collection is Asterix and the Great Rescue. This is another great action platformer for the Sega Genesis. This is about a $20 to $25 game. Beautiful looking action platformer, tons of memories, tons of nostalgia, not very expensive at all. And you can actually get this complete in box. So if you're looking for complete in box for games for your collection, here you go. But again, this is going to be another one that you probably don't hear a lot of people talk about because there isn't that shock and awe, that ooh, ah. It's not the type of game that everyone looks for, everyone's interested in. Now you have other games, right, that are sometimes, other retro games that are sometimes expensive, but not really talked about that often because not a lot of people either know about them or care about them anymore. Here's an example. You've got G.I. Joe, A Real American Hero. This is actually a top tier run and gun shooter for the NES, where you get to play as a bunch of different characters. And it's like got some really cool environments, some really cool cutscenes. And this is actually a $90 to $100 game for the NES. But this isn't something that a lot of people are going to talk about because not a lot of people in today's YouTube really care about the NES like that. The NES is really meant for a generation that's going away. No one's really going to really care about that. But for the genuine collectors, the folks who know, the folks who have been around a while, they're going to know, like, G.I. Joe, that's a really good game. They're going to want to get their hands on it. Here's another really good example. And this is something that a lot of people will recognize. The GameCube has been the hottest retro thing to talk about for the last 4 years. Everybody's always trying to get their hands on GameCube stuff. Everybody's always chasing it down. And me, when GameCube was at its height, when it was at its peak, I left it alone because I knew that everybody wanted their hands on it, and it was the hype console to collect for. And don't get me wrong, people are still like going nuts over the GameCube, but I feel like it's died down enough to where now I can stick my foot in the water and try to get my hands on some GameCube games. And so if I put out a video showing you a bunch of Mario Party games and Sonic the Hedgehog, if you're someone who's trying to start a retro game collection, but you're trying to do it with the GameCube, you're going to be really frustrated because all these games are over $50. And you might be discouraged when you find out to get 4 solid titles, you have to spend over $200 just to get those games. So that's an example of overly hyped games that could frustrate you. And then you have other games. You have games that this is going back to games that only the collectors know about. Games like Spike Out, Battle Street, or games like maybe Lost Kingdom for the GameCube, another game that not a lot of people know about. Or games like Fatal Frame. If you're brand new to retro game collecting, you're probably not thinking, oh, I need to run out and go get a copy of Fatal Frame 2. Or you're not thinking, I need to go get Spike Out. Most people who are thinking about getting into retro games are thinking about some of the basic, either you're thinking about one of two things. You're thinking about the most popular video games that you remember as a kid, or you're probably just looking for the exact games that you played when you were a child. And so that means you're probably looking for Mario, or you're looking for Sonic, or you're looking for Metal Gear, maybe you're looking for Final Fantasy. But not a lot of people go looking for these games. But it's not until people get on YouTube, they watch a video that highlights maybe some of the gameplay footage of these games. People talk these games up, and basically YouTubers, they sell people on these games. They sell people on how great some of these games are. And once people see that, they're like, man, I need to go get this game. I typically, whenever I'm looking to buy a game, I never really go and look for anyone's review on the game. I just go and look for the raw gameplay footage, and then I make the judgment for myself. I look for the, unedited, no commentary, just the straight raw video game footage. And if it looks like the type of game that I would enjoy playing, I'm going to pick it up. But I think what happens a lot of times is that people, they don't just look at the gameplay footage. They find a review from a big YouTuber, and they listen to a YouTuber talk. And usually that YouTuber has like 1,000 games behind him. And immediately you're put in this place where you're like, man, I want to be like this person, or I want to get to this level where I have thousands of games too. And I have a bunch of games that are worth $100 or $50 or whatever the case may be. But you don't need to do all that to start a solid collection. Like I said, you can start with a $10 game like MechAssault, or you could start with a $20 game like R-Type Final rather. You've got other games like Breath of Fire, Dragon Quarter, another $15 to $20 game that you could start with. So there's a lot of options that you have. It's just about tempering your expectations and knowing what exactly you want to do. I think retro game collecting in 2024 is extremely affordable. I think with $150, you could get yourself a console and 5 solid titles for consoles like the PlayStation 2, things like the Xbox 360, systems like the NES. There's a lot of damage that you could do with $120 or $150 in 2024. It's just about what you want to do and what you want to get and what you want to have. Of course, there's always the option of emulation. You can do that all day. No one's judging you here for that if that's something you decide to do. But for those of you who enjoy actually collecting the physical items, there's definitely ways that you can dive in and enjoy the hobby. But let me know what you think down in the comments. Do you think there's any truth to any of this? Or do you think it's just a whole big ball of steam? Let me know, and I'll catch you in the next video. It's the Y2K Collector. Take it easy.